and welcome to episode 25 of our Little Harbour Homewares shop project, and it's our last episode. Now, as I'm filming this intro, I've already done quite a bit on the shop. As you can see, I've got the little trees done and the window displays, so we're already about an hour in. So this is going to be part one, and I'm thinking there may even be 3 parts. So in part 2 we'll be finishing off the shop inside and out, and then in part 3 I'd like to do a series recap and obviously the shop opening ceremony, so we'll have a lot of fun with that. But for now, let's get on with part 1. I just want to start by showing you a few little jobs I've completed this morning. So the first one is I attached the sign saying Paintings by Matt Warren. I was going to do some pricing labels, but I think it looks nice with just the one sign, and then any potential customers would ask the price at the cash register. I've also glued all of the little wooden boxes into place on that top shelf. I attached some of the little polymer clay candles we made to these sort of dumpy candlesticks here. Added another stand-in picture there, and I've also dotted a few shells about, and I've attached those with tacky wax, and the shells are just really nice to fill little spaces. I've glued the tea towels into that little tray, and that's all glued onto the shelf now as well. And then I did another little bowl of shells, and they're all attached in there with tacky wax. So I really like those corner shelves. I think they look really nice full like that. Lots of different heights and everything going on there. Now you may notice that I've moved those little boxes from underneath the shelves. That was these, and I was going to put things in them, but I'm actually going to use these now in the window display. I did like a little promotional post for Instagram a few months ago now, and I did a few of these little boxes and some barrels and a lantern, and it just looked really nice, so I thought that might look really nice as a window display, but we'll come on to that later. So that's why I've moved those, so I will have to have a think about something else to go under there. I've also glued all of the bags into place along the top of the shelves there. And then I've moved the counters. Let me bring that back in. Just move that out of the way to have a bit of space to move around in the shop. I've just put a little shell on there, and you always sort of find in shops that people come up to the counter and they might leave something, they'll decide they don't want it, so there are always things to be put back on the shelves. And then I've put a little beach ball, a puzzle, and there's a card there as well, just to make the little returns box look full, and that's all now glued into place as well. Now I do need to add a few more bits to make a bit more of a backdrop on that top shelf, and Judith Porter, you suggested a feather duster. And you're right, because there was always a feather duster, or what we used to call a tickling stick, underneath our counter when I worked in a shop, which we would sort of quickly take out and have a quick dust while there were no customers around. So I'll make a little feather duster to go under there and have a think of a few more things as well. And then you may remember I had 3 crates here. I'm going to put them back just to show you, just to jog your memory. That I thought would look nice standing behind the window display, and that we could use as extra shelves, but I've actually changed my mind on that as well. I'm going to again use these in the window display, the smaller ones anyway. And then we've actually got a bit of space over in that corner, so I'm going to pop that in the corner the right way around, and I'll paint inside now. I didn't bother last time because that was going to be stood the other way around, but I'll just pop a bit of paint on the inside edge, and I want to make some fishing nets to go in there. So just the sort that you used to take along to the pond as children, and we'll make a few of those. Not sure how I'm going to do that yet, but I have got that lovely net in, so I'll be able to use that for the actual net. So I've just got to figure out how to fix them onto a rod, but we'll do that as well. And then let me just bring you over again to the messy desk. So I've got the central unit there, which I want to dress in a moment. And then I've pinched some more barrels from stock. So I'll have these smaller ones in the window displays. That one will be for our fishing nets. They'll also be in the windows. And then this larger one, I'm going to try and cut it in half. So I've measured out a half pencil mark there. And I'm going to have 2 barrels then. So I'll fill in the top of this one, if you imagine, and then turn it the other way around. So the widest part is at the top of each. And then I'm going to make some topiary trees to go outside the shop. Now, I haven't even tried to put that in my mitre block yet, but if it doesn't fit, Matt has said he'll take it down to his workshop, fit it into a larger vise and cut through with his larger saw. Because it is quite thick wood actually. It's soft wood, but it is quite thick. So I may not be able to get through that myself in here, but if not, Matt will do that for me. And then I'll paint that dark blue and we'll do those nice trees in there. And then on the desk here, I've just sorted out all of the little packages and books into order. So the next thing I want to do is dress the central unit and that narrow shelf that goes in the middle on the back wall. And then we'll have a good idea of what else, if anything, we'll need for those 2 units. The other job Matt is helping me out with, I've just printed off the water slide transfers for the mugs, and I've got those on another sheet for you to download, so you can print those off onto your own water slide paper. And I've put quite a few on there, and I've also done some that say I heart my doll's house and I heart miniatures and I heart my doll house, so that you can use them for other projects. You might want to do a few mugs to put into your own doll's house as well. But I'm just going to do the 6 mugs. I've also got on that sheet the Beachcomber Street sign, so we'll do that today as well. And I think that was about all I wanted to update you on. Oh yes, I opened the beach balls to put one in the damages box. So I also want to make a large basket, and then we'll put those in there, and that will stand in front of the greeting cards stand. So that's sort of our next few jobs. So better get on with it. So before I begin dressing the shelves, I just wanted to have a go and see if I can actually cut this barrel in half, but it doesn't even sit fully into the mitre block, and if I risk cutting it I won't get a nice straight cut, so I'm going to let Matt take that down to his workshop and do that.
So I've got the barrel here for Julie, so I'm going to try and cut this in half. There's her mark there, so I'll put some tape just around that edge, trying to keep it as level as possible. So I'm actually going to use this tape edge as my cut mark, as my line to run the saw along. Just going to pop it in the vise gently this way, try not to damage it. I'll just get my hacksaw. So I'm using a hacksaw because it's a nice fine blade. A wood saw would probably be a little bit too coarse for this. So I'm just going to gently go along that tape line. What I'm going to do is we're going to cut and then turn the barrel as we go through. Try and keep the line as straight as possible. Keep working our way around, nice and gently, trying to stay as close to that line as we can. Nearly through. There we go. Just got a nice piece of fine grade sandpaper, probably about a 180, smooth off the edges. Remove the tape and we should have a nice even cut line.
So I've just started here by roughly laying in place where I want everything to go, and already I know that I am going to need some more bits and pieces to fill the shelves. So I've got books over here, and I've got the colouring books on this one, and puzzles underneath, but I'll need some to go around the back. But what I want to do with some of these books is have two sort of glued down flat, and then have one standing up like that on top, and I'll do that side as well, and that just keeps that height. And then I can do that around the other side with these puzzles and the remaining book. And I'm just going to use glue to glue these all into place. The cups I'll need to use tacky wax, but obviously I don't want to put those into place until I've attached the water slide transfers and the varnish is still drying on those, so I'll do that later on, but I know that I've got that space left there for them. Okay, so let me start gluing things into place. So I've glued the puzzles into place, and with each of them I've laid one or two down at the back, if I just show you from the side, and then stood the front one in front, and that just gives you something to balance that front one against. And then where I actually had enough stock with that blue puzzle, I did the same thing again, and then I've just glued an extra one into place standing up at the back there, and that just creates a bit more of a full shelf. So I'll do that with all of these as well once I've printed off some more copies of the covers. And now I'm going to start on this top shelf here. And I'll probably just print off some more books and things to go in any sort of gaps, and on the bottom shelf of the narrow unit, just because it can't really be seen from the front of the shop, but I obviously don't just want to leave an empty shelf. Sort of, you know, no point really coming up with a new cover that isn't going to be seen, so I'll just reprint some of the same. So I'm going to lay two down like that. And I really like going into bookshops, and you know, you sort of have the tables that are normally set out just in the doorway, and they're always set out really nicely, piled with books, and then books standing on top of books. I really like those, so that's what I want to try and make this look like. Just get rid of that bit of excess glue, and be really careful when you're doing that, because if it sort of seeps into the paper, you could just pull the paper off. I did that with one of those puzzles around there, but luckily it was at the back. So I'll carry on along the front now. Glue these little stands into place. So I've stuck what I can along the top as well, and then before gluing the back pieces into place, I think I might add a little bit more so that I can create a sort of higher layer at the back. So if I just glued that on there on top of the two boxes, it would be hidden, but I just want it to be a little bit higher. And the same over here with the books behind the cups, which I've got a little bit more room for now. I thought I could just have two along there, but I can actually fit three now. I've actually glued it all quite tightly together. So I'm not going to carry on with this for today, and then I'll get some more bits and pieces printed off to go along the back and just create a second layer of height. So have a think about that when you're displaying your units, and that will look really nice, sort of looking in from the front of the shop. And then I've also glued what I can to the narrow shelf. I think those books look really nice on there. And again, I did the same thing where I've glued two sort of laying down at the back to give a bit of a prop for the front one. And then I've sort of tucked one in the side along there as well, just so there wasn't too much gap in. So I need something else for that bottom shelf and some more bits to go on our central unit. And then Matt has very kindly cut our barrel in half, did a really good job of that. So I'll be blocking off obviously the bottom of that one, and that will be our two barrels throughout the front, and we'll have a nice topiary tree in there. So I didn't actually do any filming yesterday, but I did manage to get a few bits done. So I painted the barrels, which are going to be our planters. And I just did those in the navy blue, so the same colour as the shop front. And then I made more books and puzzles. And then I also painted up those three crates. So I've done the, you know, like the camouflage technique underneath there, using the 3 colours as we did before for the other barrels, and then I've done a coat of the Vancouver over the top. So I just need to sand those and they'll be ready for the window display. But what I want to do now is carry on displaying the central unit and the little back shelf. So what I've started again by doing is just laying everything out so I can see what I've got, and I'm going to sort of have piles of books at the back, and I'm still going to sort of dress the unit towards the front because obviously we'll be looking in from the front of the shop. So I can create heights like that by having a stack at the back and then just standing one on top, and they don't stand up, so I've been trying to balance them and they all keep falling off, but just to show you I'll have them all standing up like that. And then the same behind the mugs here with another couple of books. And then I'm just going to have a couple of puzzles on that bottom shelf, and I'm just going to stick one so there won't be any depth, but they do actually fill the width of the shelf, so you won't be able to see behind that there isn't actually anything there. And then I've got a few more puzzles and books here. If I can just turn that round without it all falling off. Ooh. Mugs are all jangling there. I've got this space here behind the calendars, so I can use some of these to create some height. And then I want to have a couple of those smaller books facing forwards, again so you can see them above the calendars and from the front of the shop. So I'll see what I can create back there. So all I'm going to do now is glue everything into place. And I've just sort of left the mugs on there so I know how much space they take up, because obviously I've still got to put the water slide transfers on yet, which I'm really looking forward to doing. And then again, I've just sort of filled out these bottom areas with more of the same puzzles, just so we've got a little bit of height at the back of that first one. Okay, so I'll start over on this side. And you can actually cheat with these, so you could do just some little blocks of wood or some strip wood, paint it the same colour as your unit, and then you can just have those standing at the back with just one book on top. You know, unless people are sort of really looking at the back of the counter, or whether you want to take photos of it for your Instagram or something from all angles, then nobody's going to know that they aren't actual books. Just create some different heights hidden at the back with strip wood or little box shapes, make a little sort of drawer with a top on it and then paint those. So you could do it that way, because sometimes gluing them together, I'm thinking, well, it's a waste of actually creating a cover when you're just gluing another one on top. So I'm going to stick all of those like that. So I've just glued the first pile of books into place there. So get your sort of stackable books glued down first, and then you can work out how you want to angle your display book. I'll have that up there like that. Bit of an angle. Makes a nice backdrop for that one in front then. And again, if they don't stand up, just pop a tiny little bit of strip wood at the back, just to sort of make a little prop for it. But you should be able to glue them down. Just hold it as upright as you can. Give it a good press. Get another cocktail stick as well. Be really careful when you're removing your excess glue, because the paper can sort of tear if you're too rough with it. Move on to the next pile of books. So that's the narrow shelf now filled and back into place. I think that looks really good along that back wall now. Really nice and full. And we're not really going to be able to see this bottom shelf as we've talked about before. So unless you've sort of made lots of bits to fill your shop, then you can just put a couple of things on there just to make it look as though there's something on there, rather than leaving it empty. But I haven't finished the central display unit yet, because obviously we've still got the mugs to go on, but everything else is glued on. That's looking really nice and full now as well. So that's the back view, which we're not going to see, but it still looks quite full. So I'm actually quite pleased with that. But what I want to do, just because I can't wait, is have a look at how that's going to look in place in the shop. So let's do that. That's going to go so that it's sort of, I'm sort of using the side of the counter to get that first leg lined up with, and I think that's how I like it there, and then right in the centre from sort of front to back there, and then that will sit there, maybe towards the front. Maybe we could put something in front of it, I don't know yet. Have it in the centre there. I think that looks really good. And you've got, if you sort of come in from this angle, all the sort of height, different heights and angles and everything. Really pleased with that. So I'm going to do the mugs next. And I did say last time about maybe having a basket of beach balls in front of this greetings card stand, but I actually think it's going to look too much. So I'm not sure whether just to leave that like that. Maybe might think of something really sort of narrow that I could put down there. But anyway, I'll have a think about that. But I still want to have some beach balls in a basket in here. So where I was originally going to stand those barrels, it's like another sort of shelf or display area, I'm going to have a basket of beach balls here. And then what I hadn't really thought about was the shopping baskets for the customers to use. So I haven't really come up with a design yet, but I know that I want a stand which will be sort of on the other side of the door for when the customers come in. So we'll make some sort of little stand, and then we'll perhaps make some little fabric baskets. You know, the ones you sort of get in clothes shop now, so they've got like a string handle and they sort of concertina open. Maybe we could make something like that. But for the beach balls, I've actually found this measuring cup. So it's a really good size, so they all fit in there really nicely. So I've just got to get rid of this handle, and I had two of these, and I had a practice yesterday cutting the handle off with my magic scissors and then tidying up sort of what was left with my craft knife, and that worked. So once we've done the mugs, we'll come back to this. And then I'm going to put string around it to make it look like a large basket. And if we can't use the glue on this plastic, then I'll use some double-sided tape and see if we can do it like that, and then put like a plait around the top. I thought that looked quite good. So here is the printed sheet of water slide transfers. So the ones I'm going to use are these that just say Little Harbour Homewares. And then obviously we've got our street sign here as well. And I've just done a couple just in case anything goes wrong and you need another spare one. And then I've put quite a few on there. So I've done some little bits and pieces by Julie. I heart my dollhouse, and I heart my doll's house. I heart the beach, quite a few of those there. And that's just so you can sort of have a choice of which ones you want to use. In fact, I might use some of those I heart the beach ones. And then obviously you might have some spare cups that you want to do one of these doll's house or dollhouse ones on for your dollhouse or doll's house. And what I've actually done is I've placed an order with Streets Ahead today, and I've ordered some extra packs of these white mugs. So these come in packs of 6, and they've actually sold out in the shop. So you might have even bought a pack of those whilst you're waiting for these transfers. But what I'll do is I'll use some of these extra ones on those, and I'll probably sell a few in the shop, just in case you didn't want to get the water slide transfer paper yourself. So I'm going to cut out now the ones I want. So I actually only want 3 of the Little Harbour Homewares, and then I'll do 3 of the beach ones. And I did an episode actually here on Patreon, the Tea Biscuits and Doll's House chatter, about using water slide transfers. So if you're not sure of how to use it, then you can refer back to that episode. So I won't go into it in great detail here. So I'm going to get these cut out and get my saucer of water. Okay, so I've had my transfers soaking in here probably for about a minute now, and they're just starting to slide off of the backing paper, as you can see there. So let's start with one of these little Harbour Homewares ones. And I want the mugs on the unit so that the handles are all facing to the right. So have a think about that as well. I can't get hold of that. There we are. Drip off the excess water. Make sure that you're lining it up nice and straight. I've got a little bit too much water on there, so I'm just going to grab another piece of tissue and just dot that off, or dab it off. And these work really well on mugs. First one. So let's try a I Heart the Beach. Looks good, doesn't it? So the mugs are now done, and I let those dry off for a few moments, and I'm now attaching them using tacky wax. So you don't need much of this, and you don't want it so that it's going to be showing from underneath the mug, so sort of spread it out as thinly as you can. I think they look really good. So I'm going to carry on sticking these on here, and then I want to get back to our basket of beach balls. So I'm just going to start by using my magic scissors just to cut that handle off as close to the actual pot as I can. And it's quite hard plastic, so do be careful if you're doing anything like this. You might just have a little pot that hasn't got a handle on. A bit easier. Oh! So that's the handle off. And then just to get off the bits that are left, I'm going to use my craft knife. And I put a new blade in for my practice one, so this blade should still be okay. And let's come around that way. Probably the camera's at the wrong angle. Let me move it. So then I'm just going to cut through what's left there, sort of going in line with the edge of the pot, but do be careful. Keep your fingers out of the way, sort of chopping it off really. This one seems a little bit tougher than the last one. And it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of a ridge there, because obviously we'll be covering that in cord and then putting that plait round, but we just need to get rid of that main lump there. That's coming off a bit easier now. So just sort of work your way through it. Like that, so that's quite good. Let's try that little bit there. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So now let's see if we can use glue to attach the cord. So I'd rather use glue if I can. It might not work on the plastic, so let's just see how we get on with it. So I'll just start by putting a bit around the bottom of the tub. If not, we'll use, like I say, the double-sided tape. The only thing with that is once you've stuck the cord down, it's stuck. With glue you can sort of you know, press it all down towards the bottom, tighten up all your lines. See how we get on. So I've got this dark blue here, and this is a new roll, so we should have enough. So just as we would if we were making a basket using wood, just feed that around the bottom first. quite slidey at the moment. It does actually feel as though it's sticking. I'm just having trouble getting it started, but then you do as well with wood, I find. Getting that first sort of go round is the tricky bit. So I'll persevere. Get it round like that and then manoeuvre, that's better. It does feel quite sticky, so I think it will work if I can get started. So tighten that first one up. Oops. I just pulled all that down with my thumb, but that was starting to work then. So I'm really flying around now. So as always, it's just really getting that first row around that is the difficult bit, and with this more so because it's slidey, it's sort of sliding off onto the bottom. So I've got sort of 5 rounds there, tucking them all in. I'm not worried about this glue because that does pick off once it's dry. It dries clear as well. But what I've got to do now is just make sure that's all dry and stuck, and then I can put another line of glue on. I might actually do what I did with the basket that we made for the bedding and have a cream row at the top just to make it a little bit more interesting. Okay, let's put some more glue on. So I'm really whizzing round now. I am finding that every so often it's falling off the bottom, so it still wants to slide onto the bottom. Obviously when the glue is a bit more dry or starts drying, then it won't do that. I was thinking as well, this is a nice way to make like a laundry basket or something if you've got one of these bigger plastic tubs. I really like this technique because you can basically wrap the cord around anything. I think I've run out of glue now, and I think that might be a nice place to leave the blue and now have the cream. If I've got enough cream, let's have a look in here. So that's actually the natural, and then this is cream, and then the white is a lot brighter, so that's all I've got, but I think that'll be enough. So I just want to come round to there, so I joined there, so I'm cutting off there, so that can be our sort of wrong side of the basket. See what I mean about that popping off the bottom there? Might need to, I don't know, maybe put a bit more glue on or a little bit of tape underneath or something, but we'll see what it's like when we get to the end of the basket. Okay, so I'll snip that off there. And then start with the cream. Bit of glue on the cord this time. Just to get that final bit stuck down. And keep sort of pressing and pushing it down, but without pushing it off the bottom. Okay, let's finish up the glue. We'll cover the rest in glue and then get the cream on. So I pushed down the sort of previous row of cord so that I could get this to end at the back where I've done the other joins. So I'm just going to put a bit of glue on there, stick that final bit down. Looks quite nice. Still sort of coming off there, but maybe it's just because there isn't enough glue under it. Let's see if I can lift it up and sneak a little bit of glue in. Okay, there we are. So now I'm going to make the plait to go around the top, and how I measure for that is that I wrap the cord around 3 times to get the length of each sort of strand of the plait. And it's sort of roughly that. So we'll go like that, and then cut 3 of those and do our plait. So there's my plait, and I think when I was talking earlier I said to get the size go around the top 3.5 times, but I did actually mean to say 2.5 times. So I've got far too much here, but even 2.5 times gives you a little bit more than you need, but that's better than finding that you come to sort of stick it into place and you haven't got enough. Now, normally when I'm doing this around a box, you've got quite a big top edge to stick it to, but on here I've only really got that less than 1 millimetre thick plastic to stick it to, so I don't think that's going to work. So what I'm going to do is actually just stick it around the front, onto the front of those sort of top 2 rounds of cord. So I'm just going to put a bit of glue all the way around those top 2 pieces of cord, like that, and then just make a note of where your back is, so where we know we sort of joined the cord in, and then you want to start in the centre of your plait at the front of the basket. So again, just sort of get it to grip on, make sure it's right at the top, and then feed it around. Press it all down. So I'm going to trim that off just as it sort of gets to the baggy bit of plait. And then stick that down. And then come around the other way and you can join them up. Make the cut right sort of where the other one ends, and then quickly stick it down before it unravels. Must get some new scissors. Actually, I could ask Matt to sharpen them for me. I'll do that. I was going to say remind me. Remind me to do that, won't you? Okay, so get that all nice and straight along the top. And then I've sort of had a cup of tea, so it's sort of been half an hour since I've done this, and the glue isn't picking off and it's not drying clear. Now I don't know if that's because I've applied it to the plastic. It probably is, because I think it probably soaks into the wood. But what I'm actually going to do is paint the cord, and that's a really good tip if ever you find that you're sort of using a darker cord and you can't get the glue off. Or even if you're using a lighter cord and you just want to sort of touch it up, perhaps it's got a little bit grubby as you've been working with it, then you can actually paint over them. So that's what I'm going to do now. So using a nice soft brush and just the navy blue paint again. Careful not to get it onto your white or cream. You only need to do one coat, and it just really tidies it up. I think what I might do is just go across the bottom as well. It won't give really good coverage, but if we can see any of the bottom from inside when the beach balls are in there, at least you won't be able to see through to the floor. Okay, so I can now leave that to dry and we can move on to something else. Okay, so I now want to have a go at our topiary trees for the front of the shop, which I'm going to make in half barrels. So I've got here a big old tin that I keep all of my sort of flower and plant making bits in. I've got here some plasticine and then some, you know, landscape materials. So I'll be using that, which we'll use to cover the plasticine as mud. And then just lots of different bits. Actually, that's quite nice. I've got here this Jarvis green scatter. I've actually cut the corner off, so I've cut the colour off there. But they're normally just codes like JS8 or JS7 and things for the grass. So that's quite a nice colour. But then I've got that one there, which actually looks more like a sort of hedge material. So that might be quite nice. I've got some different grasses in here. And this is like a real sort of lichen type stuff, and it actually smells quite a bit. And then this is actually called Flower Soft. And they're really nice as well, just for making really easy sort of little flower plants. You can just dip the end of a piece of flower wire into glue and then coat it with these, and I've done some nice lavender plants with that. But they do all different colours, the blues, the pinks, and like a mixed one as well. So you can do sort of entire flower beds and each flower will have a different look. And then I've got florist's tape and things like that, which are really good for making leaves and things. And then some of the fine wires. Now for these I'm going to be using polystyrene balls to actually make the topiary part of the tree, and I just want a single ball on each one. And these are the biggest ones I've got, which are probably about 25mm. I could have done with a 30mm, but you don't want to go too big for your pot. You don't want it to look sort of too top heavy. So I actually think the 25 will look quite nice in there. So what we're actually going to begin doing is applying wood dye to a couple of cocktail sticks, and they will become the sort of trunks of our tree. So I've got this piece of sponge here, so you can just hold on to one pointed end and apply the wood dye to the rest, and then just pop it into your sponge to dry. I've noticed lately while I've been editing that I've been having the camera really close to whatever I'm doing. So I'm sort of trying to set it back a little bit now. So just applying walnut wood dye to a couple of cocktail sticks as our tree trunks. And we can just pop them into the sponge and leave them to dry. Like that. So pop those to one side. Clean the tin up first. I'll put the lid back on. So I'm just going to start by putting a bit of masking tape on the bottom of the open bottomed barrel. I don't want it showing from underneath, so I'm going to snip round those edges. Snip off the corners of the tape. Okay, so like that, just to create a base on there. And then a bit of a change of plan, because the plasticine in my tin has gone so hard. I've tried warming it in my hands and it just cracks. It's just so hard. Now I know, again, you can soften them like you can with polymer clay by warming them up in your hands, but I've just looked online and it says about using a hairdryer to soften it up. So this won't go to waste, but I just haven't got time to do that now, as I really want to get on with these trees. So I'm going to use polymer clay. Now it's obviously a more expensive option, but I've got this huge block of chocolate brown here. And I don't use polymer clay that much anymore, so it is just sitting in the tin, so I'm going to be using this. And obviously you won't be baking it or anything like that, it is just to sit in the barrel. to act as our base. Okay, it's got one of the blades here, so let's just cut a little bit of this off. And we really are just going to sort of press it into the barrel. Not sure how much I'm going to need. I'm still going to sort of soften it up in my hands and make it into a ball, just so that we can really fit it into the barrel and press it all the way down. Picking up all the bits there that are coming off. So I'll just soften this for a moment and then we'll fit it into the barrel. That'll probably be about enough. Might need a little bit more on there. So the barrel without a bottom has got a bigger opening in there, so I'm going to put this first ball into the part of the barrel that has the bottom there. So it's nice and soft now, so just press it in like that. And then press it so you'll sort of fill in the gap. Really sort of mould it into the barrel there. I could probably even press a tiny little bit more on top of that, just a tiny bit. And that will then give me an idea of how much I'll need for that one, so just a slightly bigger ball for that one. Okay, so I'm going to push that bit into the middle. Press that out. Like that. That's nicely filled in there now. Just make sure you've sort of not got any air bubbles. And then I'm going to use this earth, sorry, this earth scatter. What's it called? This one is Pecky, but Jarvis Materials will do the same sort of thing. And this is called a dark brown scatter material. So just any sort of earthy type scatter, or you could use tea leaves. It makes really good sort of earth. So sprinkle them on like that. Spread them round and then press them onto the clay. I should have actually done this on some card, but then what you could do is just tip off the excess. I'll just tip it onto my desk there. Okay, so I filled my second tub and put the earth on the top there, and this time I've got a sheet here to keep my work surface a bit tidier. So what we're going to do now is actually put the cocktail stick into the polystyrene ball. So I've done that one there so that that's dry when we come on to the next step. So take your cocktail stick, and on these polystyrene balls you'll normally find like a flat edge. So that's where you want to push the cocktail stick. So poke it in, but make sure you don't sort of go all the way through, and you'll feel a bit of resistance in there anyway. Take it out again and then just feed a little bit of glue into the hole, and that will then just hold our trunk into place. Just feed a little bit in there like that, and then push your cocktail stick back in. A bit like a lollipop, isn't it? So pop that there to dry, and then I'm going to get the green out, the green scatter for the tree, and then I actually want to brush the glue onto the polystyrene ball, and then we'll just roll the ball in the scatter to completely cover it. So let me get the scatter ready. Okay, so slight change of plan. I really want to use this dark green Flower Soft for the trees, but I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough for both of them. There should be, but just to make sure, I'm going to first of all paint the polystyrene balls using this lovely dark green acrylic paint, and then if there are any patches, they're not going to show up as much as the bright white of the polystyrene would. So I've just dispensed a bit here into this palette. Let's just dab that on. And it might be a good idea to do this anyway, to give yourself a base, even if you have got enough of the scatter material to cover. And I'm sure there will be enough in there, but just to be on the safe side. Like that. And then I'm going to just pop that back into the sponge and leave it to dry. The second one as well. So whilst they're drying, I just want to go back to our basket of beach balls. So the little basket is now completely dry, and I'm going to use tacky wax to attach the balls inside the basket. Now these little wooden balls have got a hole in one side, so when you're sticking them down, just make sure that the hole is always hidden. So let's start with a layer at the bottom. And again, because the basket is plastic inside, I would have had trouble trying to glue them into place. So it's just easier to use tacky wax. If I'd have made a wooden sort of box as a basket, then I would have tried to glue them into place. So that's all of those stuck into place, and that looks nice and bright. So I'm going to put that into place in the shop. And then beside that we'll have our little shopping basket stand. But what I want to do now is have a go at making the street sign for the side of the shop. So I printed off a couple of water slide transfers for the street name, just because I thought if ever you make a mistake then you've got a spare one. But I actually think I might do a sign at either side of the shop, so I'm going to use both of those. And then for the backing, I've just cut a piece of 1.5mm sheet wood to 65mm, that's 2.5 inches, and 17mm, which is 5/8 of an inch. And I basically just added 2.5mm or 3/32 on an inch to each edge, top and bottom, and each side of the sign, just so we've got a bit of a border around this nice sort of border around the edge. And I'm going to paint those white. And then I'm not sure how it is sort of over the rest of the world, but in the UK our signs are normally two sort of black sort of pieces of dowel, whatever it's called in real size, and then a white street sign. But obviously do sort of change this to fit in with whatever they're like where you are. I might look that up actually, see if this is a sort of standard thing or if they're different all over the world. So I'll be painting these pieces of dowel black and my backing boards in white, and the dowel is 70mm high, and that is 2 3/4 inches. And I haven't obviously got an exact measurement for that, but it just looked right when I held that up at the side of the shop. So I'll get the paint out and make a start on those. Okay, so I'm starting off with the actual street sign, and I'm doing it on both sides of the sign. Even though it will be sort of back against the wall, it will be sitting in front of the dowel, so I don't want there to be any natural wood showing. And I've just got this plastic pot here that I'm going to stand the pieces in to dry. And I've just got a tiny little bit of white paint left in this pot, and it's gone a little bit hard, but I just really want to use it up on these. And then I really do need to plan a shopping trip to B&Q, which is our local DIY store, and get lots more paint and things. And I'm also just starting to plan the 1940s house, the Mountfield, so I need to get some bits for that as well. So I'll probably take the camera along with me and take you with me, if you don't mind. Come in shopping with me. So I'm going to leave those to dry as well. And now I want to make a start on the first of the downstairs window displays. So what I want to start off by doing is creating a backing to the window. So we've actually got something to lean the things on that are in the window display, but also so it separates it from the rest of the shop. So obviously the width I've done as the width of the window, and measure separately because there's 0.5 millimetre difference between the width of each of mine. And then for the height, I've just gone slightly higher than the tallest barrel that I'll be using in there. And then anything obviously that stood on them will be showing in the shop as well, so that will look quite nice. And then what I'll do once I've actually painted these is do a couple of little pegs, just pretend pegs. And I think if I remember rightly where I used to work, we used to sort of twist the peg and then just pull the sort of window, this piece out. It was like a piece of board. So we'll do sort of 4 of those just to make it look like some little pegs that are holding it in place. So I'm going to paint these now, again in the navy blue, the same colour obviously as our shop front. So again, I want to do these on both sides of the wood because obviously both sides are going to be seen. And I've just got a couple of glass jars here to prop them in. Probably need to do 2 coats on each of these as well. So that's those 2 done, and I've done 2 coats of paint on each of those. So I'm now going to leave those to dry and get back to our trees. This is now completely dried, so I can make a start on those. So I've tipped the whole packet of Flower Soft out onto my piece of card, and just give it a bit of a press with your fingers. Sometimes you get sort of big chunky bits like that where it sticks together, so you just want to make sure that it's all sort of loose. And Flower Soft is actually the trade name, so if you have a look on Google for Flower Soft, you should find somewhere that you can buy it. And I just really like this one. I think it's got a really nice texture. Or you've got a really big range in the, I think it's Jarvis scatter materials or scenic materials. So that's another one to go for. But more than likely you've got things like this in your craft supplies cupboard. Okay, so put that all out like that. And I'm going to take the first tree and just apply glue with a brush. When you're doing this as well, just be really careful that you're not putting your arm in it, or if you sneeze, look away. It will just go everywhere. And I'm just putting this on with the brush because obviously it's so much easier to apply than if you were using a cocktail stick. But make sure you get a really good covering. Want to prevent as many patches as we can. So once that's completely covered, the fun part can begin. So just begin rolling that in the Flower Soft. And I always start sort of by rolling it, and then I use my fingers and actually sort of drop it on to the bits that it's not touching. And you can sort of pick it up and sprinkle it on. You can sprinkle it on heavier than you need it, and then we'll tap it off, and that will just leave what's stuck to the glue. I think I will have enough for 2. So just sort of keep going round. I think that's a pretty good coverage there. You can sort of very gently press it with your fingertips as well, just to make sure that it's all making contact with the glue. Any little white patches showing, just fill them up. And then just really gently just tap that onto the desk, and see what I mean about those chunky bits. If you don't sort of break them down, then they'll just stick out. Let's just put a little bit more on there. I quite like that. I like the texture of this. And as well, the glue will dry, and then just that green paint should show through. But I haven't used the paint before, so we'll see how that works. So I'm going to stick that one back into the sponge, and then we'll make a start on the other one. And the batteries just started flashing, so that was pretty good timing. So let's pop that back in there to dry. I'll go and change my battery, and then we'll do the second one. So before you start your next one, just again spread out your Flower Soft or your scenic material. Get it back into a nice shape, and again press it all down so that you haven't got any of those chunks. And if any of your sort of glue stuck to it, that will have put it into little chunks so you can pick it up and sort of pull it apart almost. And make sure you've got a nice flat sort of bed of it. Now I've just chosen to do the single ball on this one. I think that looks sort of quite modern and elegant. But you can do, you know, 2 or even 3 to make like those lovely little rounded topiary trees. And I do actually share this tutorial in my book, Making Doll's House Miniatures in 1/12 scale. So if you've got that book, have a look at page 115 and you'll find the tutorial. And then I also talk about doing the 2, but you could do the 3. So I'm just sprinkling on to cover all the remaining gaps now. Big gap round the back there. Gently tap it all on. Make sure it's all making contact with the glue. There's a little bit of white polystyrene in there. Get rid of that. So this wasn't quite a full bag that I used, because I'm pretty sure I used this same packet when I did the trees for the book. That's how long I've had it. So a full packet would probably do, what, if that was 2, maybe 5 or 6 of the single larger sized balls. I'm just going around now making sure I've covered everything. And these are a lot of fun to do as well. Give that a gentle tap. And don't worry if you've got a little bit sticking out, because unless a tree had just newly been trimmed, there would be bits that grow faster than the other. And we'll just get rid of that little bit that's hanging down over the trunk there at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to pop that one to dry as well. I'm really looking forward to getting those into the pot. So we'll come back to those in a moment. But what I'm going to do now is move that glue out of the way, and then you can tip up your worksheet and actually tip that back into your packet so that nothing goes to waste. So we're going to begin by making a hole for the tree, and I always use a spare cocktail stick for that rather than the stem of the tree, because if it was to break then that's quite annoying at this stage. So push that right into the centre of your barrel like that. Do that with both of them. And then again we'll just put a little bit of glue into each of those holes. So just dabble that in there. Duck just landed on the roof. Bit in that one as well. And I haven't really left my trees drying for as long as I should have, but just because I'm really looking forward to getting them into the pot. So let's take that first one we did. I was trying not to touch the actual flower soft. Press it as far down as you can. Looks good, doesn't it? And that one as well. And that one's higher, so... Oh yes, because this pot goes lower down, doesn't it? So can I... Right. If I was to pull this one up, it might sink down over time. So what I'm going to do is actually take that one out and just trim a bit off the bottom of the cocktail stick with my handheld guillotine. Let's do that now. I didn't think of that. There's probably about another 5mm in the bottom of that pot compared to this one. So take that one out carefully. It has stuck well in there. So how much do I need to take off? Hold it up like that. I know that the smaller one goes right to the bottom of the pot. You probably can't see there because of my fingers, but it's only going to be about 3mm. So I'll just snip that off. Is that enough? Yeah, probably. Let's try it again. I can always cut a little bit more if I need to. Yep, tiny bit more. I'm just doing another couple of millimetres there. Still needs more. But like I always say, it's better to just take a little bit off at a time rather than taking off too much. Obviously you just don't have to stick it as low down, but I wanted it to touch the bottom of the pot so that it's not going to sort of slide down over time. Yeah, we got there in the end. They look really good. So a few bits have fallen off there. So what I'm actually going to do now is dab a bit of glue around the bases. I'll put a bit more in there. And don't worry if you're a bit messy with it, because we'll put a little bit more earth on as well. And then I just want to dab a bit around the outside as well. You can go onto the edge of your pot, that's all right. Some of the earth probably would be spilling out. And another thing you can do if you're sort of good at making flowers is have some little flowers in the base as well. I've seen that in some town centres, a tree and a little flower display in there as well. I'll put a bit more glue on, and we'll cover all of this with scatter material. And I'll actually be glad to get my tins of scatter material back in the cupboard, because it's such messy stuff. I enjoy doing it, but I don't like the mess. Okay, so I'm going to bring the earth scatter back in as well. Let's dot a little bit more on that one. And then we'll scrape up all these little bits of greenery. I've got the tip of the cocktail stick there as well, that can go in. There's a bit of a twig. I'm just going to take a couple of pinches of this and scatter it around the top there. Again, give it all a tap down with your fingers. Make sure it's making contact with the glue. Have a little bit of green on there. You know, and I imagine in my shop to be sort of in the summertime, but if you were doing like an autumn shop or something, then you could even put some little leaves in here. Like some little autumn coloured leaves that have blown off nearby trees. That might look nice. So many things you can do. I'll go like that. Again, I'm just going to gently press it all down like that. Get a bit of that green in there as well. It's not quite going where I want it to. Sticking to my finger more than the pot. And then again, I'm just going to tap those off, and that then should give us a nice coverage. Oh, I didn't want to bang the tree. That looks like a nice full pot now, overflowing with earth. I think I'm going to lose that green bit, but it's okay. No, it's staying, that's good. And there's that one as well. Now I'm really looking forward to putting those into place outside the shop. So I'll clean up all this scatter mess and then we can see what they're going to look like outside the front door. And there are our trees in place. Okay, so now I want to get back to our street signs. I'm just going to start by cutting the transfer in half. Actually might just trim a little closer to the edge of the strip, but just be careful not to cut into it. Trim that one as well. So you might just need to sort of press them down into the water when you're using a longer transfer, just so that the transfer comes off evenly all the way along. And I've very gently sanded my signposts just with a 500 grade, just went lightly over the top, and then make sure you get rid of the dust before you attach the transfers. Okay, so the first one has slid off there. Strip off the excess. And I'm just going to dry the front on the tissue. And let's get it. I don't know how to turn the sign around then. Get it into place. I just want to make sure that the border around the sign is level with the top and bottom of the piece of wood. Make sure it's sitting evenly on there. Have a look from the front before it's stuck down. I think that's about right. Press that down with my kitchen towel. And if you find that you're sort of fiddling about with it for a while and it starts to go dry, you can just dip it back into the water. Just sort of wet it again, like that. I'll do the second one. Make sure that was the side that I sanded. So there's our second one. So I'm going to leave those to dry, and I now want to glue the rods to the side of the shop. So to glue the street signs to the side of the shop, I've just cut myself a jig here. So from a piece of scrap wood, this measures 52mm across, and that's 2 1/16 of an inch. And then what I'm going to do is place that between the rods, or between the posts, like that, and then stick them to the side, and then when we come to stick our sign, that will sit at the top of the rods there, like that. And that will just ensure that your rods are the same distance apart all the way up, without having to make any measurements onto the side of the shop. So I'm going to use my tweezers to position them. So let's go around to the side of the shop and do that now. And I'm just going to actually have it probably about an inch in, or just over an inch, so 30mm from the front of the shop. So this is the right hand side here. So let me apply glue to the first post. And I'm not going to measure that distance in, I'm just doing it by eye. And then if we just go about there, I think. Actually, I'll use the mortar between the bricks there to line it up. So push that into place. Good firm press. And I'm actually sticking it right down to the desk, so I'm just going to pop it up a little tiny bit so it's not right on the floor there. I don't want that catching when I'm moving it around. And then pop your jig, that went that way, didn't it, there. And you can glue the other one over the other side. Okay, not going right down to the floor there. Oops. I'm trying to lean around the camera here without knocking it. Take the other side of the cocktail stick. I'll just move that as I did that. Just wanted to get that bit of glue from that first side. Again, be really careful when you're removing glue from paper. And then what you can do is just apply glue to the top of those. Like that. And then bring in your street sign. And you want to sit that so that you've probably got about 1mm at the top of the rods. Try and make sure that you're even each side, and then press it into place. Try to get around the inside and give it a double press. I just want to get right down level with it and make sure it looks straight. And I'm using the mortar again to check that, so I just want to come up that side a tiny bit. Ooh. Check again. Yeah, that looks good. Give that another press, like that. I came down a little bit too far with the glue, so I'm going to get rid of that as well. So I've got my green scatter material here again, and what I want to do is just dot a little bit at the bottom of each of those posts. Let's just put a little bit on there. Take a little pinchful again. Not sure if that's going to work from a sort of forward position. There we are. Let's get a good sort of pinchful on there. And that side as well. This will just look like some little weeds growing up around the bottom. So I'll just let that dry there while I go and put the sign on the other side, and then I'll come back and I'll just use a dry brush to sweep that away. So that's both street signs now in place. Around the other side as well. Really pleased with how they look. And just to make it easier, I was thinking you could probably put a little bit of the scenic scatter onto the rods before you attach them. But you could do a little bit more if you wanted to and have it along the sort of bottom edge of the building. Maybe have some little grass shoots and things like that. Now I did originally say about doing some signs on each side of the shop. I wanted to do some of those big sort of painted signs that they used to have on them. And Matt was going to do me a couple of templates using his Craft Robo cutter. But unfortunately that has broke down, so we can't use it anymore. So until he gets a new one, which he will be doing, we won't be able to do the signs. But what I thought is, even if we finish the shop, we can always come back to those in a tea and biscuits episode and do that as like a little special tutorial, a way of creating signs and things like that and using them for templates as well, or as stencils, you know what I mean, and then you paint over them. So I was looking forward to do that, but unfortunately the machine sort of gave up the ghost. But I think the sides look really nice with those signs on. Just another little bit of detail. That sun's really nice coming in there. It's really bright out there this afternoon. It's pouring with rain this morning. Okay, so now I want to move on to our first window display.